We heard the term "too big to fail" just a little while ago, and it brings up the question of when those Wall Street businesses were collapsing a couple of years ago, and we were on the brink of economic collapse ourselves. Of course, the response that we received was that we need to do something. Now, the bailout of the Wall Street firms was basically supported by this idea of they're too big to fail. If that's not the good, then what would have been the appropriate response in dealing with the impending economic crisis that came about as a result of those collapses?
Well, that's a great question, and this was a battle quite heavily debated when Senator Bennett, when he was in the race. Fundamentally, I go back to this economic theory. Classical economics says when government intervenes in the markets, they distort the markets, they siphon off more efficient resources to less efficient uses. And what we had a crisis. Part of it was government created because we had $1.3 trillion of junk mortgages put on the marketplace by Fannie and Freddie. And so as this sort of bubble grew and grew, more people took risks that they thought would be guaranteed. They took risks that they had no doc loans, they had all kinds of feeding frenzy that created a bubble. And when it collapsed, all of a sudden, this AIG who was in the middle, because they had all these credit default swaps, they had derivatives, and they put literally billions of dollars at risk. So the government said, let's let Lehman Brothers fail, and let's save AIG. Well, what they should have done is allowed AIG to fail as well. They should have been there as a safety net, parceled out the pieces of that big insurance company, instead of pumping $180 billion of taxpayer money into it to quote-unquote save the economy. Now, economists were split on this. And I believe that had we allowed AIG to fail, it would have created an opportunity for more efficient insurance providers to come in, take pieces of that organization, and build a new, better, more efficient system. People would have lost. There would have been a lot of money. There would have been unemployment. Maybe we would have gone down to 12% unemployment, but we would have recovered much more quickly in terms of the economy. What's happening now in response to this whole disaster is this bank legislation that Chris Dodd has put forward. It is fundamentally a disaster. It is institutionalizing the too big to fail mentality with a systemic risk regulator that's going to monitor all of these organizations. They're putting more layers and layers of government regulation by the Consumer Protection Agency that they're putting in place. They're hurting entrepreneurial capitalists by raising levels where you can actually qualify as an accredited investor. So we're moving into more government away from more efficiency. And as a businessman, as a classical economist, I'll fight for more efficiency in the marketplace.
The bailout reminds me of a story from a few years ago when I was working in Washington, D.C. for Justice Alito during his first full term on the U.S. Supreme Court. Each justice has a small legal staff of just 4 young lawyers. 4 lawyers, 4 of us worked in a small office about the size of that corner of the room. We found that during the summer months, our office was freezing cold. Our hands would go numb. In order to be able to continue to write opinions for the justice, we had to build a fire in this old marble fireplace in the office, which was strange since it was summertime. Then in the winter, during the summer months, even when we would turn up the thermostat, it didn't do a darn bit of good. It was still freezing cold. And the exact opposite thing happened during the winter. It was just burning hot. So we had to open the window, even though it was freezing cold outside. It was still burning hot inside. We lowered the thermostat. It didn't do any good. We were still roasting. Until one day we got the building supervisor of the whole Supreme Court building. Came and looked at our system. He dismantled it. He said, "Gentlemen, I found the problem. Your thermostat was installed backwards in your office. Every time you turned it up, it was just making it colder. When you turned it down, it was making it hotter. It was doing exactly the opposite of what you wanted it to do." And I thought, there's a type in this thing. This is symbolic of what's happening directly across the street, the U.S. Capitol. The U.S. Congress, every time something bad happens, does something that it thinks is going to make it better, when really it's just making it worse. That's exactly what happened, I believe, with TARP. We had an economic crisis that can be traced, I believe, to excessive federal government regulation, to excessive entanglement by the federal government in everything we do, to subsidization of businesses that should never have been in existence in the first place, to excessive regulation of others. And so it's as if we took a fire and we threw on it the first thing we could find to put it out, and that first thing happened to be gasoline, which made it worse. When bad things happen in the economy, we've got to look to the government to get it out of the problem, because government isn't the solution, government is the problem.